Hello and welcome to another edition of No Nonsense with Pamela Wallin. General Wayne Eyre is Canada's Chief of the Defence Staff, and he is set to retire in about 24 hours after 40 years of service to his country and all of us who live here. General Eyre joined Army cadets at the age of 12, and he's been in uniform ever since, and he's been around the world ever since, commanding forces in Croatia and Bosnia and Afghanistan and Korea and dozens of other places. He has a Bachelor of Science degree, 3 master's degrees, and has won, there's a long list of awards here, but I'm just going to include these 2. His decorations: the Commander of the Order of Military Merit and the Meritorious Service Cross. 40 years of military service. And the other most important thing about Wayne Eyre, which I'm going to share with you all of now, is he grew up just outside Wadena, Saskatchewan, the center of the universe. General Eyre, welcome.
Oh, Senator Wallin, it's my pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation.
It's great. I know that I'm going to blurt out Wayne at certain points just because I've known you forever, and please call me Pamela. But it's just, this is an amazing time, 40 years in the military, where every single day you are in a system that tells you where you're going to be, what you're going to do that day, what time you're going to get up, what is going to happen tomorrow morning.
Well, when I wake up, hopefully a little bit later, yeah, it's going to be something different, because this lifestyle has been with me for over 4 decades, and it's the start of a new adventure, uncharted territory, and we'll see where it takes us.
It's the timing is amazing. The juxtaposition of the commemorations in Normandy, and probably a last venue for most of our World War II veterans, a NATO meeting where where Canada's role is being put under the spotlight, and where we see people like Putin making huge moves. I was just reading the other day, President Xi, he's holding a big Communist Party conference, and he declaring that democracy in the West is in decline and decay. This is a very pivotal time.
You're absolutely right. This is perhaps the most dangerous time in world affairs since the Second World War. Now, we think back to 1945 and the guardrails that were put in place with the rules-based international order, the international institutions that, while they haven't prevented war, they've prevented great power war. And those guardrails, they're starting to erode, and that needs to really concern us. I think history is going to view this period that we are in as a turning point, and we need to make sure it turns in the right direction.
You must have been, as you take your leave, troubled by what you heard and saw at the NATO meeting. Canada's role, one of the founding members, but we are now down literally at the 3rd from the bottom of the list of contributors to NATO in terms of our spending. Our allies were troubled. We heard from both Republicans and Democrats, from our biggest ally, that they need us to step up. What's going wrong? Why are we losing this profound and special place we've always had in this institution?
So you mentioned being troubled, and I'm troubled with the state of the world. And what we're seeing is a confluence of stressors in the security environment. And I like to talk about 4: geopolitical, climate change, technological, the rapid change of technology, and societal. We've probably seen more change in our society in the last 10 years than the last 50 combined.
Right.
Geopolitical, though, is at the top of the list, and you talked about some of the stressors there. The increasing alignment of these authoritarian states, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, that are increasingly cooperating and feeling empowered by each other. And that has pretty significant consequences for us. say, listen, it's not my place to talk about our level of defense investment. My place is to talk about what we need, the capabilities and readiness that are required. Our allies like us at the soldier level. We are well respected as individuals. We provide operational excellence wherever I go. People want more Canadian troops. They look up to us. They see us as integrators. They see our troops, and I tell our troops this the same thing, and they see it themselves when they have the opportunity to go overseas. They are great ambassadors, and moreover, they are great soldiers. You talked about Normandy. I was there just over a month ago, and I was reflecting on what an accomplishment Canada did during that invasion. A relatively small country, but to step up the way we did and play such an important role, a role that hasn't been fully explored yet, because there's a number of historians that talk about that defeating of the German counterattack that saved the Allied landings. We are a country capable of great things. And you talked about me going around the world and seeing various hotspots and operating there. Well, I tell you, there's not too many countries that are ahead of Canada where I would rather live. And so we need a sense of self-confidence in ourselves. And this navel gazing, this beating ourselves up, is not doing us any favors.
I agree that beating ourselves up is not great, but I mean, you've heard the words from your former colleagues. In fact, just last week on the podcast, we had Andrew Leslie on. You've heard from Rick Hillier. You've heard from Mark Norman. I mean, these guys, like you, dedicated their lives to the military, and they're worried. I mean, at the same time, we're not paying our bills and talking about new plans for the military. We're restricting budgets. So it's the messages are mixed. And I want to dive into that a little bit if I can, because, Andrew Leslie said an interesting thing, and it's absolutely true. When we needed helicopters in the middle of Afghanistan and the Prime Minister intervened, we got the helicopters in 15 minutes. So we can do this stuff if we set our minds to it. So where's the block? He says, political leadership is the issue, that when they want something, it can happen. And otherwise, you have to sit and wait until a political decision is made.
So I agree. This is all about choices and will to get things done. And I often think back to historical analogies. What if this was 1939? What if this was 1914? And so you've got some who ask the question, why should we invest in defense if you can't spend the money that we give you? They should reframe the question to, what can we do to help turn those resources into capabilities and readiness for the good of the country? That's the frame that's required to rapidly make sure that we have what is necessary to defend this country and make sure that we've got our place in the world and do our part. Our competitive advantage as a country, I firmly believe, is being part of a group of like-minded friends, partners, allies that can group together, that can stand against that increased alignment of authoritarian states and make sure democracy can thrive. And to do that, we do our part. We have to do our part, and that means making sure that we can protect our own backyard, the Arctic. That means we can live up to what we're being called upon to do with NATO, and given our trade, the opportunity for miscalculation and conflict in Indo-Asia Pacific, stand up and do our part there. And so, yes, the Canadian Forces is invested in these regions, but this is where the threat is going to be as well.
So that's, and I want to get into the Arctic in just a moment, because we've been declaring our sovereignty there for decades, but it's being challenged in a very real way now. Well, let's just go there, because this is it. This is our North, strong and free. plans to build subs, plans to build icebreakers, plans to expand the satellite ground station, the operations alert, plans to enhance cyber, but it's all out. It's like our NATO commitment, another 8 years, when in fact we've got the live wars going on now. And this is when people like the Ukrainians need our help yesterday.
So let's go to the Arctic and discuss that, because that's going to become a theater of, or a region of increased tension in the decades ahead. And so there's not a threat to our sovereignty this year, next year, or next decade, but we need to be thinking in strategic terms. And what I mean by that is the next half century. And so as the Arctic becomes much more accessible, there will be increased interest. There already is. And with that increased interest comes increased opportunity for miscalculation, for challenges to our own sovereignty, and for conflict in that area. And if we are not ready when that time comes, we're going to suffer because of it. So I'm going to go back to that confluence of stressors. We're seeing Russia and China cooperating more and more. Russia, increasingly isolated, has turned to China, who has acquiesced to China. In fact, this is in the Arctic. We're seeing more cooperation between the two. This has traditionally been a wedge issue between the two of them, but not anymore. And so increased exercises, increased research, et cetera, from the two of them. Russia is viewing, and they've got infrastructure that is far more developed in their Arctic than we do in Canada. They, I believe, are taking a page out of China's playbook in the South China Sea to gradually expand their influence through what we call anti-access aerial denial capabilities, just like China's done in the South China Sea, to control the area. Late 2022, they had an internal law to make the northern sea route an internal waterway, completely against the rules-based international order reflected in UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention of Law of the Sea. And we see their A2AD capabilities, those bubbles of anti-ship missiles, air defense missiles, et cetera, gradually expanding. Now, we have competing maritime claims with Russia in the Arctic. And what's to say in the decades to come, if we are not ready, we'll be presented with a fait accompli, and we will lose those claims. And so having a number of capabilities, or a number of abilities in that region is incredibly important. What do I mean by that? First of all, we have to know what's going on.
Right.
And so that means awareness of what's happening in the air, on the sea, underneath the sea, on the seabed, in space, in cyberspace. And then based on that awareness, the ability to act, to project capabilities from the south to the north, to respond to whatever the anticipated situation is. This means infrastructure. And we have to start now because of the timelines it takes to do anything up there.
Well, that's the thing. We have to start yesterday. I mean, the Chinese have been mapping the seabed up there for a long time. The Russians are in our airspace regularly and can be. They've got 40-1 the subs that we've got, like literally. And possession is 9/10 of the law. They don't care about the international rules-based order, or they wouldn't be in Ukraine or other places. So that's what's troubling, which is, have we left this too late?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Ukraine, because the reason this is so important, it's the sanctity of international borders. And so if might makes right, if you can arbitrarily change internationally recognized borders, if you can arbitrarily decree a people's no longer has a right to exist, right, that does not bode well for the future of the international order. That does not bode well for stability. It's a very, very slippery slope, and you can see the impact of our own sovereignty in the north in the decades ahead if this is allowed to become the norm. And so, is it too late to go back to your question? Yeah. Well, that's why a sense of urgency now is so important, to do everything now that is possible.
Yeah, that's, I think,
I'm going to
go ahead.
I'm
No,
going to
go
give you some
ahead, finish your
timelines
thought,
here.
Wayne. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to give you some timelines here as to why this is so important. We are facing some adversaries who are limited by time. And so if you take a look at the demographics and the economic challenges of both Russia and China, if you take a look at Russia's ability to reconstitute its military, which we're seeing, and most importantly, if you take a look at the age of their two leaders, self-declared men of history and destiny who want to accomplish certain things during their lifetime, a number of us, including our allies, are seeing peak threat to the international order come at the end of this decade or the beginning of next, based on all those factors. And how do you address peak threat? Well, you have to be able to deter it. And so that means having the capabilities and readiness in place to build that peak readiness before the peak threat comes. That's why we need a sense of urgency in delivering.
Yeah, so this is my point. Like, and I think that's a very interesting way to describe where we're at and why they have a sense that their time is running out too. And so that there is, as you put it, peak threat at this point. But we are, still talking about we're going to have a study on this, and in 8 years we'll get our defense. I was reading today, I mean, we contributed 7% of our GDP to NATO at the end of World War II, and then it's just been doing this, right? And you get little peaks when there's activity in places like Afghanistan and people are aware again, but we have no consistency. So we've got this policy, our North Strong and Free just announced, it's all there. The commitments are, $73 billion worth over the next 20 years, but it's 20 years.
And it's going to take a while to rebuild our readiness. If we think we're an institution that has been hollowed out for the last number of decades, the peace dividend that was cashed in many times at the fall of the Berlin Wall, coupled with the unipolar moment that we are in, during which most of us gained our professional experience. Well, that was the end of history at that time. It was a time of hope. We were going to see the triumph of democracy around the world. Well, history has returned, and for far too long, Canada has been in a privileged spot of being relatively immune from what's happening in the world. We've been safe
because our neighbors have our back, and we have counted on them.
And we've been safe behind three oceans. But what we're seeing now is what we're calling a globally integrated threat environment. The range of capabilities, think hypersonic missiles, think all of the strike capabilities that are being fielded, means that we are no longer as immune from occurrences, from activities on the other side of the planet as we once were. That speaks to the importance of NORAD. That speaks to the importance of making sure that we can defend our country.
I just heard the Prime Minister last week in one of his comments on route to NATO, I guess, basically, I don't know, it's like every political leader comes, and I know, and I wouldn't ask you to comment politically, I'm not saying that, but he was once again sort of talking about that peace dividend, right? That we've been here, and now, just this moment, the world is changing. Actually, it's not just this moment. And we should have been seeing all of this coming, which is people like you and your predecessors have been asking to get us to a state of readiness. What don't they hear? Or is the problem really the 4-year election cycle and therefore the 4-year attention span?
Well, we have not had a national security dialogue in this country to really unpack and understand the threat. I contrast that with the visceral sense of insecurity that I see in Eastern Europe. I was recently in Latvia and Estonia in May. The sense of insecurity is real. They have living memory of being occupied. They have seen the war crimes, the sexual violence, the deportation of children that's happening in Ukraine, and they do not want that to happen. Poland is saying never again. We don't have that deep sense of physical insecurity here that would drive a national security dialogue that we really need. And given the threats that are coming, we need that. We need our population to be talking about this because what interests our population will drive the direction that our country goes. But it's bigger than that as well. And if you take a look at our perhaps our top national interest, the prosperity of our country. Prosperity of our country is predicated on stability and certainty in the international order. We're a trading country, and uncertainty, instability will have massive economic impacts to our country. And so what that means, hey, we have to coexist with these adversaries that are out there, but let's coexist from a position of strength. Let's deter great power war collectively with our friends, partners, and allies. Because we take a look at the cost of great power war, which we saw in World War II. To do it with today's technology, it would be absolutely devastating. And so think of this as prevention instead of the cure.
Yeah, this is what's so frustrating. I mean, when the Americans went through 9/11, we all did because Canadians were lost too. It focused their mind on domestic security needs and a state of readiness all around at home and abroad. We've just witnessed the attempted assassination of a president of the United States. This is close enough to home that this should be scaring the hell out of us.
Yeah, but we also need to be very worried about another threat to our country, and that's disinformation. It was Clausewitz that defined the nature of war as a contest of human will. But if you can affect that will without fighting, you have won. And so we have natural fissures in our society. But if you've got others driving wedges into it and spewing conspiracy theories and lies and disinformation, that creates a narrative of distrust and of a society in decline, because that's what our adversaries would like to see. Democracy in decline, not to convince those that are sitting on the fence, but the biggest existential challenge to them, which is their own population and giving them a sense of hope. Well, if democracy is in decline, there are no other options. And so that's why it is so important to address this disinformation. Hey, the People's Liberation Army has got a strategic approach called 3 warfares. And one of those is cognitive warfare, aimed to develop a narrative to undermine trust in a society, trust in institutions of liberal democracy. Right. The government, the electoral system, the media, our own institution, the military, and you see us under attack as well as many of those other institutions. This is aided in great part by the proliferation of social media, those echo chambers of confirmation bias that are out there, and you see many spiraling into disbelief. It's a real challenge we've got to address.
No, it's there and it's real, and we're not going to fix that one tomorrow because it's of its insidious nature. But what we can do is try and get ourselves ready for the real physical threat that is there, because the physical threats are not a product of disinformation. We witness it. We witness, we witnessed 9/11. We're witnessing the Middle East. We're witnessing Ukraine. These are real, and we want to help. But if you don't have anything in the basement or the back room or the storeroom ready to go, you can't help. You can't be a player. You can't participate.
Exactly. And we have tremendous uncertainty in the years ahead. And those four stressors in the security environment that I talked about means we don't know what's coming. So we need to be ready to rapidly respond. We are the nation's ultimate insurance policy. And so we need to be able to respond to threats we don't even, we can't even imagine at this point, but we see them coming. Hey, history has told us that we are either at war or in an interwar period. And you could argue right now that this is a pre-war period. And our history in this country is one of military unpreparedness. Think about the situation of unpreparedness that we were in 1914, in 1939, in 1950, in 2001. And so we need to do everything we can to build that readiness to be able to address that next surprise. Part of that is national resilience as well. Being able to absorb the shock of surprise and bouncing back.
I'm going to come back to the process, because there's a couple of, why it seems impossible, the way the budgeting and the procurement process works. So you're assigned money to buy a piece of equipment, but if you don't buy it in 1 year, then the money that's allotted for that year goes back into the books, and then you start again, and it takes us 20 years to not only build but pay for something. Isn't there a better way to do this? Isn't there a better way to clean up procurement, so that if you need an icebreaker, you say, we're getting an icebreaker, here's the money, it's allotted, it sits there till the thing is delivered, period?
Yeah, and I am not a procurement expert, but I know more risk needs to be taken. We aim for absolute perfection in the process, and in some cases, rightly so, because it's the taxpayers' money, and it needs to be well spent. But if we delay, and we have seen over the course of the last number of years, defense inflation at 17%.
Of course, yeah.
It is just getting much more expensive. And so making rapid decisions and going out and buying capabilities off the shelf, proven capabilities, is one of the ways we need to go forward. Working with industry much earlier on in terms of a partnership, so that we can define requirements. And in some cases, we will have evolving requirements given the acceleration and technological change. And in many cases, the technology will change as the production line is in progress. Think about think about
F-35s. We've watched it. Yeah.
Think about an iPhone. You got an iPhone 11. It stops working. We'll go out and buy an iPhone 14. But we're going to do that incrementally. We're not going to replace every iPhone at the same time. Right. As they become non-functional, and we spiral up with that new technology. But we got to become much more agile at that. And so, given that that rapid technological change, we have to have the line from innovation to acquisition much faster as well.
And the
other
we're doing
thing, R&D.
Yeah, I'm just on I'm going to take a little tangent here, but I was reading this a couple of weeks back in a conversation that we were having about Afghanistan, that there is drone technology, and you can use that, and it's a nice modern piece of equipment, and yes, thank you Elon Musk and all that kind of thing, but actually you've still got trench warfare going on in the ground, and they're literally in their tanks or in the trenches, and where they are because both sides have the technology, and it just kind of brings things almost to a standstill, because we're trying to make the old work with the new, and it doesn't work.
Well, some are making it work. You're seeing the juxtaposition of legacy technologies with cutting edge 21st century technologies. So a soldier from the First World War would recognize the trenches in Ukraine, but there was a lot of uncertainty. What was around the corner? What was around the next bend in the trench? When you have a drone overhead and see that, it is so important. But despite the emphasis on drone warfare, much like the 20th century, 70% of battlefield casualties are still being caused by artillery, same as the First World War.
Yeah.
But also the same as the First World War. You see a confluence of technologies that have made the defense much stronger. And you can't break through it. You can't advance. And we're seeing the same thing in Ukraine, as both sides are struggling to restore battlefield mobility.
I want to ask you about two things that are related. The military is 16,000 people shy. 67, you can correct the numbers if I'm off here, but 67,000 applications, people who want to join the military, fewer than 4,000 accepted, and we're sitting there with 16,000 people short. What's wrong with the process? Why can't that move more effectively?
Okay, let me correct the record here on a few things. So, between the regular and reserve force, we are short about 14,700, and it might be less at this point. That figure is several months old, but over the course of last year, we have actually grown after 3 years of shrinking, and so regular force, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000 plus short. It's also important to note that our establishment grew by 3,500 since the start of the pandemic. So at the same time our establishment is growing, the numbers are going down. That's what's causing that gap. So what you're talking about is the conversion rate of those who apply versus those who actually make it in. Our conversion rate has traditionally been 8 to 1. Over the course of the pandemic, it went up to 13 or 14 to 1, which is pretty standard for our allies. If you take a look at world average conversion rate for all industries, it's about 25 to 1. And so for every job opening, there are 25 who apply, one gets in. What we have seen are, over the course of the last number of years, who many put their application in to test the water, and they're not following up. 70 to 80% do not take the Canadian Forces aptitude test. And there's a sense that there is test aversion out there. When we have a trial that's ongoing right now, where for a good number of occupations, I think it covers 70% of applicants, we are moving that test to much later in basic training. You're already in. And we'll gather data from that to see if that makes a difference. This is the type of mindset that we need, the willingness to experiment and try new things. So on the recruiting side, we have many initiatives that are ongoing, and we're working with our closest allies on this as well, because they're facing many of the same challenges. I'm happy to report that we started this fiscal year in a much stronger position on recruiting than we have in the last number of years, which is really good. We've had to put number of extra basic training courses on that were other than our program. Our attrition rate is down below historic norms. And so normally we're at 7.1, 7.2%. Last fiscal year, we're at 7.0%, which compared to our allies is excellent. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but boy, we have lots of work left to do. Some of the things that we're doing on that, we're taking a look at our common enrollment medical standards, and our understanding of medical risk is evolving as we take a look at such things as ADHD medication, asthma, allergies, those childhood.
They used to be out, so now you're saying let's see if this can't be made more functional.
Yeah, exactly. Let's do some trials. Let's gather the data and bring in that segment of our society. Security clearances is a really big one as well that we're trying to accelerate. And indeed, we're leading the rest of government on this. 23% of our country is foreign born. That's a significant untapped pool of talent. But if you have any foreign affiliation, you require an additional level of security screening. Okay, well, let's make that faster. Let's issue provisional security clearances, because let's face it, we're not going to share state secrets as a new recruit. So let's bring them in faster that way.
But
we've just signed an MOU with
your actual pool of people. I mean, there's and I'm sure you would say the same thing, but I've talked to a lot of military leadership over the years who would say give me a good Saskatchewan farm boy, such as yourself, and put them into the military. They know how to work with equipment. They know what a gun is. They know how to fix stuff. They know how to deal with just life in a way that maybe urban kids don't. We've also got an awful lot of people, our immigration numbers are high, or people coming in various forms, coming from countries where the military is repressive, not a career option, right? So that whole base pool is changing dramatically.
Yeah. So you touched on a wicked problem that we're facing. And, I agree. Rural lifestyle,
Yeah.
gives you certain skills and an aptitude for part of our business. But we're seeing in this country rapid urbanization. And so the challenge that we're facing is the vast majority of our recruits are coming from urban locations. The majority of our operational bases are in rural locations. Right. And so it's a bit of a culture shock when you move from downtown Toronto to someplace like Wainwright, Alberta.
Exactly.
And so we have not cracked the code on that, and that's going to be a challenge going forward. We have to find some way of incentivizing that mobility across the country. But yeah, that is a big challenge. Likewise, you talked about the recent immigrants, with the military seen as a tool of oppression as opposed to a force for good. I firmly believe, and I know we are a force for good. And we can be an integrating function for members coming to this country to better integrate into Canadian society and share our history, share our values that we earned in the price of blood on foreign battlefields. If we take a look,
what do you think about the notion of some kind of mandatory service? We were hearing talk about this in the US. I don't mean a draft. Well, I guess you sort of do in a way, but we watch in Israel where every man or woman, young man or woman, they do service. And so they are for a lifetime connected to the military, and they understand it. And we watched a lot of those people kick into action after October 7th because they understand it. We have cadet programs, again, of which you were a part, but it's not really integrated into our educational system in any real way. And as you say, especially in an urban school, this would be as foreign as, anything I can think of. It's just, we need more connectors.
Well, so there's a number of models that are out there, the widespread conscription, or some of the Nordic countries. Sweden, for example, has got the selective conscription, where everyone needs to put their name in, but they only take the top 5%. And there it is coveted. It's a good thing to be drafted. It's something that they put on resumes with pride. I was good enough to be drafted. And so I personally think, it would be good for the country to have a better sense of our civic duties, as opposed to being so focused on individual rights and everything for yourself, and better understanding the collective responsibility that we have as Canadians to our country. And it's not military service. You think about the increasing frequency and intensity of natural disasters. Well, having that labor pool to draw upon would be very, very valuable. And of course, there's many other ways to serve. But one of the things that we haven't thought about since the end of the Cold War is mobilization. Ukraine and Russia are thinking about it right now, and something that we need to put our minds to as well. How do we mobilize if the need arises? Not only our population, but our industrial base as well.
Well, you'd think we would have learned some of those lessons in the pandemic. I mean, we didn't have our backup supplies. We bought stuff that didn't work. We threw it on the junk heap. I mean, we're still not really assessing that properly, but that's what we need to do here too. You got to have something in your back pocket, right?
Yeah, well, that goes back to being that ultimate insurance policy, and a mobilization insurance policy on top of an insurance policy.
Yeah. The you touched on this, the urban, and as you know, I lived in the States for a while and it was post 9/11. But there wasn't a day in my entire time in the US where I didn't see a man or a woman in uniform on the street. And they don't have a lot of military bases in New York City either, but around the country. We do have these isolated bases, and we keep them very separate from the population at large. And you can literally grow up in downtown Toronto without ever seeing a person in uniform. Like, we do need to fix that. There needs to be more presence of you, of people like you with your uniforms and your ribbons, so that they get it, so that they understand that you earned those somewhere, and blood was spilled, and you are the insurance policy. How can we do that?
Well, the fact of the matter is the face for the most part of the Canadian Armed Forces in our large urban centers is the reserves. And
Yeah.
we need to continue to invest in our reserves and build them up because they provide such a vital service. And these are great Canadians who, for the most part, are balancing three legs of a stool, their
Yeah.
professional civilian life, their home life, and their part-time military life. And we need to continue to support them. They do great things. As we ramp up our force in Latvia, 20%, up to 20% of that force will be reserve members, and they have responded across the country last year to floods and fires.
Yeah.
So they are out there and need to be more so in the face of Canadians. But we also got to change the narrative. And I talked about the cognitive warfare and harmful narratives attacking our institution as well. We need to celebrate our accomplishments and report on them. This is an institution of great people doing great things. And whenever I travel around the world or here in Canada and see our people, I'm inspired. When I go to Europe and see our young corporals and privates, I'm talking 20, 21-year-old soldiers training Ukrainians who might be 10 years older than them. And they tell me that this is the most meaningful thing they've done in their short lives. It just fills me with hope and inspiration. And I wish the rest of the country could see that. But I
That's
also
how
wish the
I
rest.
felt. I came back from Afghanistan. I watched that very process unfold. I watched the
Mhm.
respect, the story often told, but our soldiers would be out on a mission somewhere. They'd come back. The Taliban would have burnt down the local school where girls were finally learning how to read and write. And before our men and women took a shower or had a meal, they went out and rebuilt the damn school and said, "There, in your face, boys, we're going to keep doing this."
I am a firm believer that we are a force for good in this world where it's clear that evil still walks, and
Yeah.
our people are part of something bigger. And in this day and age, where it's very easy to become unmoored and isolated, this is something that provides purpose, a
Yeah.
transcendent purpose of doing something that is important and that is good.
It's
And
it's
for me,
really important at a time when, and we started this conversation with how we denigrate our own institutions. We're a bad country. We're settlers. We have committed all these horrible acts. We've got to change all the names and deny a bit of history. It's hard then to take pride in the flag and the country and the institutions like your own that represent the best when we're constantly doing that.
I have seen the thin veneer of civilization ripped away in numerous countries, and the ugliness that remains is not good. The chaos,
Yeah.
the anarchy, the neighbor killing neighbor. We don't want that here. We have so much to be thankful for in this country, but what we lack is a sense of tragedy, a tragic mind, if you will, in the words of Robert Kaplan in his great book of the same mind, about what human nature can truly be if it's not protected, if it's not, if we don't have the right institutions in place.
I want to just end with a little bit of insight if we can. Somebody sent me this quote the other day. I'm a big fan of G.K. Chesterton, who was, of course, a journalist of some note, but a writer. Courage, he said, is a contradiction in terms. It means a strong desire to live, taking the form of a readiness to die, which is what you're all about.
That is an excellent quote. Another one that I've referred to often in this job is Teddy Roosevelt's "The Man in the Arena."
Yeah,
and if
absolutely.
you're not familiar with that one, it is one I refer to often, about getting in there, getting the job done when
just
there
being
is
just showing up, being in the arena, for sure.
No clear answer, and the cowardly cynic up there.
Yeah.
Not willing to make their own decisions, but throwing stuff at you. In fact, an American by the name of Joe Byerly had a follow-on to The Man in the Arena. It was called The Man in the Stands.
Yeah.
Who, with a hot dog in one hand and a beer in the other, with mustard dripping all over their shirt, yelling at the man in the arena. And I sometimes sense that environment that we're in.
Yeah, for sure. So what got Wayne Eyre into cadets at age 12, 14, and then dedicating your life to it? What drove you?
So from an early age, I would head off into the woods with my brothers, my cousins. We would have sawed-off hockey sticks, and we would patrol against each other, pretending we were soldiers. I had the little toy soldiers, sets of those, and I was just fascinated. So this has been a calling. I tried to join cadets when I was 11. They wouldn't let me. I was too young, so I joined at 12, and that's really solidified it. And I have been so lucky with the career that I've had. It hasn't been easy, but it's been a journey. And I think of the journey described by Joseph Campbell in his work about mythology. And it's not the destination; it's the journey that you travel along, that arc of that journey, and the people that you meet, the growth that you have, the challenges that you face along the way. And I wouldn't trade this for anything. And I share with the new generation that's coming in that despite all of the challenges on the horizon, those dark clouds that are forming in the security environment, and our own institutional challenges, that I'm envious that I would do this all over again. It's been such a wonderful opportunity for me. The institution has done so much for me, from my pretty humble roots in Wadena to this. I sometimes, it's surreal sometimes, the experiences that I have, but got to stay grounded in where I came from and what this is about. And this is about the people of this organization and soldiering.
It's really important. We in Wadena, because I'm involved in the Legion, as is my sister, out of respect and in memory of her father. And we now do in the town, trying to create this connection that you would have from uncles and fathers and brothers and grandfathers and whatnot, that people, real life people, served their country. So we have posters, and there's one of Wayne Eyre, a big poster, and every year before November 11th, we put the posters up, just so there is that connection to history and a time and place and people who have served. I just want to thank you. I mean, I wrote this in a note to you at one point, that you make us very proud in Wadena and you make us proud in Saskatchewan, but I too am lucky enough to have traveled the world, and you make me very proud to be a Canadian because of your willingness not only to serve for those 40 years, but you stepped up and became the chief of the defense staff at a very difficult time, when the institution was in a bit of a crisis. And I think you've steadied the ship. So I am just going to take that opportunity to say thank you on behalf of a lot of people, probably most of whom serve under you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're going to miss it, aren't you?
Yeah, we're heading off the unknown.
Yeah,
we have no plans. I've been strongly recommending nothing for the first while, and so we're going to get the stress level down, the adrenaline level to something approaching normal, do a little bit of travel, and then see where life takes us.
Yeah, no, it's a great time. I wish you all the best, and thank you. I'm honored for the time and the conversation with somebody who really puts his life on the line. It is that contradiction between the courage and the readiness to die, and you embody it. Thanks for the conversation, Wayne. All the very best.
Well, thank you. Look forward to seeing
General,
you soon.
yeah, see you soon. Chief of the Defense Staff on his last day in the office. So we'll see. We'll follow. We'll find out where you go. It's all the best. Thank you to everybody for joining us today, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I most certainly did. That's it for this edition of No Nonsense with Pamela Wallin. See you soon.